So the film, what I just screened, it's talking about the people who actually Jewish, they are in the third generation, and they had a lack of identity, which I think in our time it's very important how you identify yourself. You have to belong. You want to belong. Especially in big places, although compared Budapest to Mexico City, it's not that big. But still, from my generation, I really feel like everybody looking for where to belong, what's their own identity. And from the beginning of I remember from my high school, I started to deal with Jewish topics. I learned more and more about it, and when I went to the university, I wanted to study something very multicultural, like a lot of interdiscipline, I would say. So that's why I went for aesthetics, which is a philosophy of art, and I finished in films, and my other master's in cultural anthropology. And in both studies, I was dealing with Jewish topics. I wrote my thesis about Holocaust films, and the second one I wrote about Jewish communities, young people, like young communities who established their groups after the '89, like how they recreated their own identity, how they established their Jewish heritage again, because the second generation actually not really exists. I mean, exists, they remember their parents' stories, but it was more like a closed book that nobody wanted to talk about it. And the third generation was the first generation that they opened this book. And this was the first film that I made after a lot of videos. So I started to work on short videos that was recording in different events. One with the Chabad, the other one with the Orthodox community. Somebody also talked about a Jewish festival, what we established more than 10 years ago. I also created a video about the whole festival, and it was in the TV, like a commercial kind of, to tell the people that there is a festival that established by Jews. It belongs to a Jewish culture and heritage, but it's open to everyone. So please come and enjoy. And it's one of the biggest festival. And I'm really proud that I was part of the beginning of the organization and created that short thing that talks about like how it's important to be multicultural and not to be racist. The 120,000 number, it's based on the idea that so when the government goes around and asks people like how they identify themselves, they identify themselves Jewish. It means that they feel the belonging. It doesn't mean that they're going to the synagogue. Maybe they go only for Rosh Hashanah. Maybe they go only for Yom Kippur. Maybe they went 2 times in their entire life. Or maybe they went only for Yom Ha'atzmaut in the park. It doesn't mean that these people are celebrating or participating in the community. It means that they themselves identify themselves as Jews, which means that they inherited this identity. So it's very different to compare, like Europe to compare to other places, because a lot of people have this heritage, the feeling to belong to, but it doesn't mean that they have a synagogue, that where they are members, they pay for it, not at all. They're born from Jewish parents, but it doesn't mean that they have their own community. It's the whole, I would call like the Jewish community, which actually we never call a Jewish community because we have so many that there's no one Jewish community, you know? So we have, I cannot count because I'm not, a historian of the Jewish community in Hungary. But there's, like, if even you Google it, you will find there's a very different groups of Jews who are like starting from Chabad to different Orthodox and also to Masorti, which I was part of. Like I was a member of Masorti, the Masorti movement for long. I still feel like I'm part of the Masorti movement, but it's only one community. And there's also the how to call the reform movements, and we have different reforms too. Each reform, I would say, because like when you say that, oh, you are reformed, like no, I'm not belong to that community where is the woman is the rabbi. It's too reform for me. We have a different reform synagogue, so we count the communities that goes to different synagogues because the rabbi actually define, what is that specific community belongs to. And and also we have so many different culture centers. For example, the Israeli Culture Center, the GCC. What we have it's called Aurora, which is a place where it's very multicultural. It's in a neighborhood which is a bit like outskirt. I would say like not in the center. Just it's a more poor neighborhood, and they trying to develop it. They're trying to integrate people also in the neighborhood and in the different Jewish communities to establish something which is very modern and important for the whole communities. And what we have a camp. It's in Szarvas, which is very important for the when you grow up and you actually realize that you have a Jewish connection. So the camp, it's already bringing every kind of children from all around the world. There is Americans, there is Israelis, and from everywhere from Europe. So it's already very international and Jewish. It's a Jewish camp. The third generation, I think it's a very interesting generation because they are who actually looking for the answers. They are researching, they're doing their steps to find out like where they belong. The second generation, they always say that they don't have information, they don't want to talk. The first generation are the Holocaust survivors. There's so many films, interviews, resources that they're working with Holocaust survivors, so I felt no need for that.
And how did you choose?
And my generation is the third generation. I know these people, and I wanted to create a group of people who are between 20-something and 40-something, because they already experienced a different history. Some of them already were grown in the 80s, which is totally different than the 90s. Because in the 90s, we got everything we became, part of everything, and like the Western society, the Western things arrived to Hungary. So it's so different to experience that when you are children or when you're an adult. And of course, the Jewish community, like how they reestablished themselves and how they became proudly open and doing every kind of culture events. It's different when you're 5 or 15 to experience. So that's why I wanted to have these different ages in the film. And the 6 people was really hard to go down. Like we had a long list. We had like, if I remember well, like 35, 40 people on a list. And we started from each people say like, okay, let's make groups. We wanted to have like somebody as an artist. We wanted to have somebody who's working for the community, working in education, working in Tikkun Olam, also related to the community, not that much related, to see the different perspectives. I think it's very important when we're talking about, and especially when you give a lecture about your community, to not give a false picture. Obviously, not everybody is active in the community. Not everybody is forced their lives to just be professionally Jewish. This is how we call it, like a Jewish profession, Some people just want to go sometimes to a place and enjoy their identity, and some people like spend their entire life to create other people's identity. I'm also come from a mixed family, and a lot of people comes from a mixed family, and for me it's what I feel influenced by. It's a heritage that I think that we should keep, because it's very important where we come from. And in general about Holocaust, I feel like we have to talk about it, we have to share it, we have to screen it in a film, because it's very important to tell people that actually it happened, first of all, because a lot of people think that it's not happened. And secondly, that it shouldn't happen again, because we cannot change the time, we cannot go back, but we have to educate people that it's never again. And this is very important for me. And all my works, I really try to put an emotion. I try to bring people's emotion out, to not to be direct, but to also influence people to understand equality is the most important things in our life. In the last 2 years, I really learned to let it go and only work with people who would like to work with me, who actually want to open a door. And with the time, and you know, documentaries are like long. This was my first like long something, and I really don't like to call it as a film. I more prefer to call it as a video, because my other projects, what I've been finished already, or I'm working on it, it's more longer time to make it. Because you go back and you go back again and again and again, and you ask questions, and maybe from, I don't know, 60 hours, there is like 20 minutes, but there is like 20 minutes which is very strong, and it's just a miracle. Like you feel it on your skin, you know, or it sparkles in your body, that everybody will understand there's something happened there. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm working on a project which is called Aliyah, and it's very a specific group of people that made Aliyah to Israel, and they have to be not halachically Jewish and women, because I'm looking for the decisions that what they made, do they convert or not? Because when you're not convert and you will have children in Israel, it means that the children won't be Jewish. And I think it's a very hard decision. I found out something through a friend, that actually when you make Aliyah and in your passport there is a different identity. It's called 4A and 4B when you are not halachically Jewish. So you code it as a non-Jewish Israeli in a way. So you also code it in the whole society, in the government. They know that you are not Jewish. So you either convert or you accept that you're not Jewish. Although in Eastern, and also I think Eastern Europe and Central Europe, you grew up with a very strong identity that you're Jewish. So it's a very controversial situation. And I already like working with one woman, and I found another one who actually converted like a couple of months ago, the second one. She's from Moldova, and she really feels connected to the Orthodox community, and she's looking for married to an Orthodox man. And hopefully I will have a chance in the next 2 months to travel to Israel to interview with her or start to work with her. I'm looking for like 3-4 women from a very different, diverse background, because I would like to see the different stories and the decisions. I don't want to judge that. I don't even know like what's better, like what to do. But it just, for me, a very interesting identity decision that you make for yourself and how you think of your future what do you see in your future and for your future kids, because man doesn't have to do this. It doesn't matter for them. So the Center for Jewish History in New York, they invited Adam, who was my partner. We made the film together, to give a lecture on how is the Hungarian Jewish community nowadays. And he told me that what I should say, like it's a bit complex and there's so many people, like different ideas, heritage. And we decided it's easier to show people with faces and stories. Because when you just give a lecture and there's 120,000 people with different backgrounds, what you can say and how people will connect to the topic and how people will understand from in a different continent. It's very hard. So that's how actually we sat down and we decided that this is going to happen and we'll interview these people. I offered 3 films because I have 3 different films which is deals with Jewish topics. And Vivian said, like, either this or the Silent Hero, which is about a nun who had to rescue Jewish kids under the Holocaust. And so I screened that film in the Moishe house a week ago, and she said, okay, so let's do this film here. Because if the same people, like some of the same people goes to the 2 places, it's just not good. So I already screened 3 films here, because in the Moishe house, so the 3rd film, it's a sketch film about a Hungarian poet who died in the Holocaust, and it's with 7 different short films. And one of the films that I also co-directed, it's an animation, and Mark, who is living in Moishe house, and he was organizing. Okay, so he was the organizer of the event. He said that he really liked that film. So we saw The Silent Hero and also the film called Femme, and it's an animation that I directed.